All right, Andrew, we have a question from a listener.
Fantastic. I love questions.
Awesome. Well, let's go then. This is from Melissa, and she is inquiring about the community of yoga and in the yoga studios in her community. I know we've seen it in our own community that there's this great focus on how hot, how fast, how uh, bendy you are, how capable you are of pushing yourself in a yoga class, and kind of ultimately what that looks like and the physical appearance of us. I do yoga to be skinny, and really how that is negatively impacting what yoga is all about.
Well, I mean, I've been in the discipline of yoga for 30 something years, and um, I've seen it change. So I know what Melissa's talking about, what she's referring to, where we've moved away from the spiritual community connection that we might find in a room of like-minded people who come to have those conversations or have those experiences, to something that becomes very akin to a group fitness class, not
Mm-hmm.
not too different than a spin class or a boxing class or um, something that's very formulaic. And it's kind of what it's done is stripped all the best parts, in my opinion, and actually all the difficult parts of the discipline of yoga. It stripped it away and laid bare and made it just about physical movement. Um, and I believe that the entire community of yoga in the United States, and probably let's just say the United States, my experiences, I've traveled around this country, um, is done that because they feel like they need to, because the stereotype of what yoga is, the cliche is, it's bendy, it's your favorite brand of yoga clothing, which I'm not going to say.
Mm-hmm.
It's your body type. This is what it should be, and
Yeah.
and the culture has told society this is what yoga is, and then so people who are trying to run a business in the yoga community feel like they need to make that because that's what the clients expect.
Yeah. I mean, how many times have you heard someone say, I want to take a yoga class, but I'm just not bendy enough or
Yeah,
flexible enough to
yeah.
take it? And like my mind is like, come on, like,
Right. And so my response to that, and I was like, it's like, well, I don't really care about your physical flexibility. I want to see flexibility between your ears. And that's when I just get a blank stare,
yeah.
like, wait, what?
Or how do you, what
Yeah,
posture is that?
exactly. um, so that's a problem where, in my opinion, the industry has cannibalized itself, where it continues to try to become the thing that it doesn't want to be, but feels like it has to be to survive.
Mm-hmm.
It's just eating its own tail.
Yeah.
Um, and um, my experience is that people want those other parts of the discipline. They just don't know how to find them,
Yeah.
right? And um, and there's nothing against anyone who finds their way into the journey via asana. Right?
For me, the asanas were the gateway drug
Sure.
to a spirituality journey. It was like the door was open, and like this is the path forward. And it wasn't about getting into a handstand. It was about being able to using the postures to sit for longer in meditation that allowed the space in your ears.
God, I'm so proud right now. I mean, that sounds like something Andrew would say.
He's been drilling it in my head for 4 years, but it's fine.
You're welcome. I think that's what you were trying to say. Thank you.
Sure.
Uh,
Rant. The rant card is back out.
but not everyone shows up with that same open-mindedness.
Yeah.
And I've probably talked about it many times on this podcast, where people come to me after taking one of my vinyasa classes or whatever class that I teach that's teaching movement, and they're like, hey, I want to be able to do Shirshasana, or and they're like, show me, and I'm like, no. And they're like, why not? I was like, well, you're scatterbrained right now, like you're not focused. For the last 60 minutes that we've spent together, you're physically not ready to make that move, and you're also like trying to shortcut the system.
Yeah.
And so when I say, that's kind of like my way of understanding that this person's actually sincere in their discipline. So if I say no to them, they're like, okay. I'm like, okay, we're on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
If I say no to them and they get upset, how dare you? Then I know we're working in different books. We're not even in the same library. But that, again, it comes back to the culture. So to Melissa's point, where she goes to show up, she feels like she's going to find her community. You can't show up with an expectation.
Yeah.
So
well, how do you, like, to Melissa's point, and to anyone who might be searching for their yoga community, the one that is welcoming, and all of that stuff is left out at the door. How do you encourage yogis to find that community if on every corner there's a new yoga studio that's promising?
You have to find something that resonates with you. My experience was, and I jokingly call myself a recovering yogi, and it's not because I'm physically broken. It's because my connection with the discipline is kind of jaded.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really enjoy going to studios. But I tell you what, my personal experience was, at some point I was physically broken. And after practicing for 15 years, and then I went off the mat for about 12 months, 18 months, and I worked on the harder parts. And then I decided, once I was physically prepared to go back, really all I wanted to do was be alone. So I would show up, be anonymous, sit on my mat, do my asana practice so I could become stronger again in those places that were deficient, and just be myself, and roll up my mat at the end of the session and leave. And I thought that's what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
And what kept attracting me is, like, I need to go back, because I was feeling like I just needed that solitary space to work on myself in a room full of other people. And what happened was, the community came to me. So as I'm sitting there by myself in typical stoic Andrew fashion on his mat, people coming over to me like, hey, what's going on? Are you doing today? I'm good. Or after class, they'd come over like, hey, how do you do that? Yeah. And by accident, I created my own community. My community came to me.
Yeah. Okay.
But it was about showing up and putting yourself in places. So if you walk into, like, if you don't like doing hot yoga, then don't walk into a hot yoga studio. I mean,
right.
If it causes you distress, then don't do it. But I think about putting yourself in places and showing up. Again, hold on, what's the name of this podcast? With no expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing what happens.
That's the hard part, because we all, the simple act of picking out a new yoga mat, it sets an expectation, right? Like there was a time where I was like, I gotta have the best gear, because I was a gearhead with whatever I was getting into, and like, just the expectation of, like, this mat doesn't work, and
so it's the mat's fault.
The mat's fault. So slippery on this mat.
I'll never be able to do that because this mat is subpar.
This downward dog. No, but just having, like, being able to say no. There's a studio in the area that one of the things that I fell in love with it was there were no mirrors, and so it was weird and wild at first, because you're so used to looking in the mirror and kind of judging yourself on how perfect or imperfect your posture is. And the removal of the mirror to me in the studio was really kind of cool, because it took that element out.
Well, I'm not going to be that guy just to be different, but it's about facing it too.
Yeah.
So if you can be in a room with mirrors, because from an Iyengar standpoint, like, he was all about putting mirrors in the studio, so you could look at yourself and go, am I doing the right thing?
Yeah.
Am I in the right? It wasn't about looking at your body and go, man, I look fat today.
Well, but that's the challenge. So
that's the mindfulness part.
That's the mindful, yeah.
Right. Mindfulness part is not worrying about what's going on next to you. I mean, I've been in so many studios in my life, And I know as soon as I unroll my mat, or someone comes next to me and unrolls their mat next to me, I already know what I'm up against. I can feel that energy.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes I feel like I'm at the starting line of a race and I'm about to go to race with this person that's next to me, because I can just feel that energy that they're
Yeah.
giving off. And my job is, as I'm working on myself in that moment on that rectangle, is to not let that energy penetrate my mat, not detract from
Yeah.
what I'm there to
And that
work
work
on.
is done off the mat outside the
Yeah.
studio.
I mean, um, it if you derive pleasure from being in a room, like there's some great experiences that I've had in some really not great yoga studios. Like what we conceive, like this idea of like some of the first yoga studios I went to, it was just there's carpet on the floor, there was ratty drapes on the window, it smelled of like thick incense, and some of the best experiences, the things that I really learned a lot about, was in those rooms. When I travel the country, I always try to find a small, like local studio to practice in, and it's real kind of, no frills, just like here's what we got, and I love that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't need, you know, all of these big things, but I feel like in those places I connect. That doesn't mean that I won't go to a big studio just to be like, okay, this is what it feels like. But I tell you what, when I do go to a big studio, I feel like it's showtime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I got to show you something.
It's so.
Let me show you
Yeah.
something.
It's so hard to quote Andrew, to leave your ego at the door.
Right. So you got to find your own community, or it'll find you. And that's the thing is, but you can't close yourself off. You've got to put yourself out there and see what happens. I personally believe that the discipline of yoga is a community thing. It's the internal and external support that helps move you forward, that a community can provide. Again, and then we live in a time now where we can be anywhere in the world and build our community, and that's something beautiful. Like, many years ago, you'd have to trek across the world to go find your community and sit in a room with people of like-mindedness who are on that same journey. But now we can find that wherever we are.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing. So keep searching for it. Find what you need, and you may be surprised if you stop looking that what you need arrives as well. And just enjoy it. And if you run into people in the studio that give you bad energy, try to practice that hard part of the discipline, compassion.
Oh man, you and I've talked about this a lot, of being able to be in, practicing the asanas in a classroom setting, and being able to shut off the mind, not just your to-do list, but the energy and the things going on around you. Just takes so much work. But I will tell you, one of the greatest gifts is walking out of a classroom and knowing that something that bothered you last week did not even stir you this week, and that again is the work you do off the mat.
Right. And it's just not, it doesn't always happen every week, and it's not always like a step up. Sometimes you go backwards, but it's
keep
about
showing up.
But just keep like letting it happen. Play with it.
Yeah.
So put yourself out there. Don't discount yourself. Don't be dismissive. Yeah, just because something doesn't work for you doesn't mean it shouldn't work for anybody else. We can have probably another episode, have a longer conversation about the cannibalization of the industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd love to have that rant. We should probably get that made into a neon sign.
Neon sign.
So I can put that behind me.
Yeah, but you know what? The change makers are us.
Right.
Anyone who steps into the yoga journey and sees it for what it is, past all the smoke and mirrors of the commercialization of it,
or even the Kool-Aid bits of it. I mean, we're the ones that have to make the support things that we enjoy, like that resonate with us. So support those studios, support those teachers, support those podcasts, and
no expectations.
but create that. So if you want to, really build your community, sometimes you've got to support those things as well. And it doesn't always mean monetarily,
Yeah.
you know.
If y'all have like anyone listening, like send us more questions, send us more thoughts. Um, kind of engage with us and what you're.
Tell us what you need.
Yeah.
We'd love to talk about all the things.
Awesome.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
No expectations.